Good morning. You guys should have picked up 2 handouts on your way in. At some point you'll want to staple those together. Both of those make up 110. So I don't know if I mentioned this last class after our test or not, but we have one more big unit and then probably a small quiz or two before we start to worry about semester exam. And our last big unit from the textbook is sections 2.5, 2.6, and 2.7. So 2.5 is actually what we'll start looking at tomorrow, and it focuses on the fundamental theorem of algebra, which you probably know, but you may not know that it is the fundamental theorem of algebra. And then 2.6 and 2.7 are really all kind of the same topic. They get blended in together. That is graphing rational functions, horizontal asymptote rules, finding holes, finding vertical asymptotes, finding x-intercepts, throwing all of that onto a graph, just like you should have done in Algebra 2. But for both of these topics, the 2.5 topics and the 2.6, 2.7 topics, we will need to do some polynomial division. So we need to take a day and review long division and synthetic division. So that's what we're going to do this morning. So let's go ahead and start on that, please. Okay, so most of the questions on the front and back of the first page, I just give you, instead of giving you twice the number of questions, I give you half as many, but I'm going to ask that you work them both ways, both with long division and synthetic division. So let's focus on long division for a minute and review how to do that. So with long division, you need to take the divisor and put it out front like this. And long division is considered an algorithm because it has just a couple of steps that you repeat as much as you can. So the first step in the algorithm says the first part of your answer, this thing up here is called the quotient. The first part of the quotient is the thing times m that gives you m squared. So I would start off with m because m times m is m squared. But you also do it times everything else as well. So m times -8 would be -8m. Now this next part is where most of the mistakes come in. So I'm going to start highlighting this, the rest. Sorry, I need to update attendance there. What you're really doing is you're taking these 3 terms and subtracting all of this stuff. So you could either do minus all of this in parentheses. The reason why I don't like that is a lot of times you guys will remember to make this one minus, but then you forget to distribute it because you're just not consistent enough with it. So instead, the way I'm going to word it and emphasize it is after you multiply m times m minus 8 and you get this, go ahead and just quickly change the signs and add instead. That's the same thing as distributing that negative and then adding, but I just feel like this is a little more consistent. So these two are supposed to add to 0, and they do. If they didn't, I would probably need to question my pick here. And then over here, again, this is not negative 15m because we're really subtracting a negative 8m. These combine to be 1m. And then you've got a minus 11 that has nothing to combine with. So those are the long division steps, and now we're just going to repeat them. Next part of our answer is supposed to be the thing times m to give us m, so that should be a 1. Take 1 times both of these. I'm going to highlight it, to emphasize, change the signs and add. Okay, and then our algorithm's finished. We just need to know how to write our answer. There's nothing times m that gives you -3 without making a fraction with the m in the denominator, which is not what we're interested in doing. So your answer will come from the quotient, the stuff up here, and you also have to use the remainder, unless the remainder is 0. So the first time you guys ever learned long division, it was probably before you knew any algebra, before you saw any variables in the problem, and so you probably had a teacher do something like r -3. You remember that? Okay, mathematically that means nothing, so don't do that. They did that for you because you did not know fractions or you were not good with fractions, so it was just kind of a placeholder. You need to do add the remainder over the divisor. And since this is plus some negative, you could just make it minus if you prefer, but you always have to add the remainder over the divisor. Okay, let's do one more long division, number 2, where I'll say the steps again, and then I'll have you try it with number 3 to make sure that there's not something immediate that you are not understanding. Okay, so we have to know how to set it up. Divisor goes out front. Use this little long division symbol. First part of your quotient, first part of your answer needs to be the thing times n that gives you n squared. So that would be n, because n times n is n squared, but also n times -6. Then before you do anything else, quickly change the signs and think of it as adding, since that's where most of the mistakes happen. These add to 0, these add to 5n, and -29 plus nothing is -29. Okay, start the steps over. Next part of our answer is the thing times n to give us 5n. So multiply those two, but also times a -6. And then right away, before you give yourself any chance to forget, change the signs and add. The remainder is not -59, the remainder is 1. And your answer comes from the quotient plus the remainder over the divisor. Alright, so finish copying that one down, and then you try question 3 to see how it goes. Then we will go back to question 1 and talk about the synthetic process, which is a different process, but same question, so we should be getting the same answer. let's see how you did. So our divisor out front. Like that. Okay, so it looks like the first part of your answer should be n, because n times n is what gives you n squared. But you also have to multiply it by everything else. So if there was 10 terms here, you'd have to multiply by all 10 terms. So 5 times n is 5n. Before you forget, change the signs and add. So the first place I would be concerned you have a mistake is right here. If you have 15n, you did not change the signs and add. Next part of your answer needs to be 5, because 5 times n gives you 5n. Also 5 times 5 is 25. Before you forget, change the signs and add. So if you did this one correctly, but then you didn't change this one correctly, you might think that the remainder is like 43 or something. Remainder should be -7. And in the end, your answer comes from the quotient plus the remainder over the divisor. Okay, so you'll have some chances to ask more questions later about long division after you practice some more of them. But do you guys have any immediate questions? I'm assuming you did some of this in Algebra 2. Okay, then let's reset, go back to question 1, and talk about the other method, which is synthetic division. So we got the same purpose. So our answer to the second part of number 1 better be the same as the first answer we got to number 1. Just synthetic has a different setup, a different algorithm, and it does have some different strengths. Each of these kind of have their own little strengths. But for synthetic division, where the divisor equals 0 is the number you put out in the top left. Then you have to list the coefficients in order. So the biggest thing I have is m squared, and I only have 1 of those. The next biggest thing would be m's, and I have -7 of those. And then the last thing should be the constant. So that's what the setup looks like for synthetic division. But most people, myself included, think synthetic division is a little bit nicer because it kind of falls into place a little bit quicker. The algorithm is a little bit easier. So it's really just 2 steps, and you repeat it as much as you can. So you're going to add down. So 1 plus nothing is going to be 1. Then you multiply these 2 and put it in this spot. That's the 2 steps. And then you do it again, add down, multiply these 2 and put it in the next spot. Add down, and then I quit because I can't do that anymore. So add down, multiply, add down, and multiply, add down. Now, this is not our answer, but this helps us get our answer. 1, 1, -3 is just a list of 3 numbers. That's not how these 2 polynomials divide each other. So we have to think about what we started with. This guy represented m squared, and then we were dividing out an m. So what we're doing by doing this division is we're lowering the degree by 1. So if it was a second degree, this first number represents how many that I have to the first power. The one after that would be his constant, and then the last one should always be the remainder. The remainder still needs to be added over the divisor. Now I know it's tempting to put it over 8, but you're not dividing by 8. It's just the way synthetic division works. It's just part of its setup. But in a minute, when I ask you to practice a few of these, what you should be doing is probably whichever one of these 2 methods you think is easier, but at the end, they better be the same answer. Different process, but same purpose. Okay, so let me do this again on 2, and then I'll let you try it on 3. So where the divisor equals 0 tells me the number that goes in the top left. Then I have to list off the coefficients in order. So if these were rearranged, I would have to arrange them. But the thing with the biggest exponent, there's one of them. Then the next biggest, there's -1 of those. And then the last thing, the constant, there's -29 of those. Okay, and then our two steps are add down, 1 plus nothing to get 1. Multiply these two and put it here. Do it again by adding down, multiply these two and put it here. Add down, bless you. And then we have to interpret these three numbers. These three numbers do not make sense as the final answer, but they should tell you what your answer is supposed to be. So if I started off with n squared and I divided out an n, what I'm really doing is lowering the degree by 1. So now this represents how many n's, this represents the constant, and this represents the remainder. You still need to add the remainder over the divisor. The divisor is not 6, it's still n minus 6. Same thing we get with long division. Okay, so go ahead and copy that one down, and then I'd like you to try 3 just to see if you have any immediate hiccups from that. Okay, so the number you should have put in the top left, not +5, but -5, the number that makes the divisor 0. Then your coefficients should have been 1, 10, and 18, because I have 1 of the biggest, 10 of the next biggest, 18 of the smallest. And then adding down, you get 1, multiplying, you get -5. Adding down, you get 5, multiplying, you get -25. Adding down, you get -7. And then we need to interpret what these three numbers meant. So if I started off with the n squared, but I divided by an n, this now represents the degree less than squared. So I've got 1n. The next thing would have to be the constant, and the last thing would have to be the remainder. Remainder still gets added over the divisor. Same thing we got from long division. So in a few minutes, when I ask you to try some of these at your own pace, if you feel more comfortable with long division, you should do it first. Then as you go through synthetic division, if it's not getting the same answer, you can kind of match it up and see, have a good hint about what went differently. Or vice versa. If you feel stronger with synthetic division, do it first. You can feel pretty confident about this answer, and then when you start doing long division, if you can see that something's different, it should at least help raise a red flag that you need to do something different. But, and of course I'll help you guys with that as you need it, but is there any immediate questions over synthetic division? I'm guessing last year you guys did a lot of synthetic division and probably just a little bit of long division. Is that about right? Okay. Okay, so I've got, I want to give you 2 tips, and then I want to skip all the way to the back page because I want to compare and contrast these methods a little bit. They're not exactly the same thing. But my first tip I want to give you on number 4 is, and I'm not going to do it for you because I want you to get the rest of the practice in, but when you do synthetic division on this one, if you say I have 1a squared and then a negative 28, that's not going to work. Synthetic division is great, and most people really like it, but everything has to be in the exact right spot. So if I don't look at this, and I'm only looking at this, it looks like you're telling me the constant is negative 28 because it's last, and that's true. But then right next to it would be the next biggest, which would be your a's. So this is like saying 1a minus 28. And it's not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be 1a squared. So with long division, this is optional, but with synthetic division, it's not. You have to say I have 1a squared, no a's, and then a constant of negative 28. If you don't put that placeholder in there, then synthetic division is processing a different question than you're intending for it to be. So just a friendly reminder of this. Again, you're welcome to do that long division, but you don't have to do it long division. Mathematically, it should still work out. Okay, on the back of this page, this one's not as important, but questions 6 and 7, just for your sanity, don't divide by 3 plus k, divide by k plus 3. That way it just looks a little bit more familiar. Instead of dividing by negative 1 plus k, divide by k minus 1. Same thing, it just makes it look a little bit more familiar to the other questions. Okay, and then skip all the way to the second page, the top of the second page. So most people would say that synthetic division seems easier, so why do we bother with long division if synthetic seems easier? Well, long division is the only type of polynomial division that always works. It's kind of like the quadratic formula. If you only learn one way to solve quadratics, it has to be quadratic formula. If you only learn one way to do division, polynomial division, it has to be long division. So sometimes the first page, I have you working it both ways so that you got a little bit of a safety net. You have an idea of what the answer is supposed to be. But the last 4 questions, it doesn't say you have to work them both ways. You can work them whichever way you want to. But before you do synthetic division, you have to know when it works. So you should only try to do synthetic division if you're dividing by x, a 1x to the first, that's implied, invisible math, plus a number, or x minus a number. Of course, it doesn't have to be x. It could be n plus a number or n minus a number. The variable doesn't matter. But if it's not in that format, you should not be using synthetic division. Now, technically, you can learn a couple more steps for some other questions to make it work sometimes, but it's honestly just not really worth knowing those extra steps because you've got to do long division for some questions anyway. So if when you do question 13 at the end, you should save these last 4 for at the end after you've done the others and you've got some kind of a check. When you do this one, and let's say you want to do synthetic division, maybe you think synthetic division is easier, you need to realize that you cannot use synthetic division, and the reason why not is because of that 2 out front. It's not in this right format. It's supposed to be 1x to the first plus a number or 1x to the first minus a number. If it's anything else, you better do long division. But yes, you can do long division, and the reason why, long division always works.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes, sir.
On 13, why couldn't you set x to 0 and then do synthetic?
Well, you can try it. You can try both methods and see, but when you do that, if you say that like up here you get -3/2,
It would just be pretty ugly.
Well, it's not just that it's ugly, but when you do synthetic division, you have to then do an extra step or two, which honestly I don't even remember what those steps are because it's kind of silly to do that. So, but I'm not discouraging you from trying it. Do long division, see what the answer is supposed to be, try that, and then see how it matches up. But so for 13, you really will need to do long division. But 14, you can do either method if you think both methods work. Same with 15 and 16, although I may disagree. I think there's only one method that would work. Okay. So anything from 9 through 12 you want clarification on? And we will start using this stuff even tomorrow. Getting into section 2.5 tomorrow, we'll do some synthetic division or long division I think once tomorrow, and synthetic division probably 6 or 7 times. So we get into it pretty quickly. So y'all need to make sure that you feel like you remember this well. So reset, go back to question 4. Again, start with synthetic division if you think it's easier, start with long division if you think it's easier, then do the other method and make sure you're getting the same answer. And when you're not getting the same answer, I think you should have a good hint about what went different, but if you can't find it, then that's where you need me to look at your work and give you some help. And of course you guys still have the majority of class here for this, so really should not need to finish this up for homework, but I guess if you don't finish it in class, you will need to do it for homework. I will also ask for this tomorrow morning, but if you finish it in class, you're welcome to throw it in the Google Classroom before you forget.